Good afternoon. Today we'll be talking about oxygen therapy. Whenever oxygen is in use, you always want to follow all the safety rules that apply. No smoking, no use of any open flames, no open candles. Watch how you operate oxygen next to any heat sources. Be within at least 5 feet of a distance. Do not use any products that may contain petroleum or alcohol. No Vaseline-based products. If a patient has some type of skin breakdown over the ears or around, over the lips, and under the nostril area, you want to use a water-based lubricant. Stay away from spraying any aerosol sprays within the vicinity that may filter into the oxygen therapy, as well as stay away from any scented warming candles or any type of air fresheners when the oxygen is in use with their home environment. Today we have an oxygen concentrator. This oxygen concentrator is a AirSep Elite concentrator. This particular one has a liter flow of 8 liters per minute, and you can tell by looking at your flow meter here. When it comes to the concentrator itself, it is electrical, so it will always need to be plugged in to a grounded electrical outlet for proper and safe function. When power is initiated, you may activate the power button by pressing this button here. Every time you initiate power to the oxygen concentrator, you should hear a short intermittent alarm sound. That lets you know that the backup alarm system of the oxygen concentrator is functioning properly. During the course of use, if there were to be any type of power failures or the concentrator would start to fail, you will have an audible sound that will alert the patient and or caregiver and family members to be able to come and check the oxygen therapy. This button directly above the power button is what you call a reset surge protector button. It's a safeguard in order to prevent the concentrator circuitry from further damage in case of too much electricity or a bad circuit. That will cut power to the unit, causing it to alarm consistently, and then you will need to reset it prior to powering back on. Right above that is an hour meter. The hour meter is basically a counter for the amount of hours that the concentrator has been used since this was new, and every certain hours there would be internal maintenance inside that would be completed in order to make sure that the concentrator is still providing the oxygen purity levels of 92% and greater up to 99.9%. As long as the concentrator is functioning properly, it will never run out of oxygen, so you will never have to have a need or worry about the oxygen concentrator not being able to produce the oxygen prescription needed for the patient. When you look at your flow meter, you do have a control knob that will control the amount of prescription and prescription setting. To increase or decrease, you would use counterclockwise or clockwise. If you go counterclockwise, that would increase the liter flow. And if we go clockwise, that will decrease the liter flow. You always want to make sure that the ball is cutting the line, or the line is placed where the ball is at. That will be the set prescription for the actual patient's therapy. This position here is where the oxygen will be delivered going to the patient, and that will be where the humidifier bottle and or O2 Christmas tree connector will be connected. In order to receive oxygen from your oxygen concentrator, you will need to be able to use your accessories. We have different type of accessories set on the table before us when it comes to the oxygen therapy. First off, there is a difference in liter flow or prescriptions. We have standard liter flow oxygen products, and then we have high flow oxygen products. Standard flow is for patients anywhere from 1 up to 5 liters per minute. High flow begins above 5 liters per minute, all the way up to 10 and above. Okay? When it comes to the humidifier bottle, you actually have the bottle and actual canister cap. If you were to twist it to disconnect the two, there's actually water inside the humidifier bottle that should be cleaned and changed at least once a day for sure. Twice a day is recommended. Currently there is distilled water in there. You always want to make sure that the water is somewhere between the maximum line and the minimum line on the actual humidifier bottle. We never want to let it fall below the minimum line or become empty. If the water is empty in the humidifier bottle or too low, the oxygen therapy may not be delivered to the patient as the prescribed setting. This humidifier bottle has the same functionality. Maximum line with a minimum line, only difference is the cap, and this one is rated for a high flow pressure. When administering or connecting the humidifier bottle to your oxygen concentrator, you would first place it underneath here, kindly setting it down. I like to hold my hand underneath it to kind of let it rest, and then you slowly turn this at the top until it stops. Once it stops, you can see that it's firmly connected, and then now time to move over to your next tubing and then your nasal cannula tubing. So when it comes to tubing, we have different lengths of tubing available. 7 feet, 25 feet, and 50 feet. You never want to exceed 50 feet whenever connecting tubings. After 50 feet, it will no longer be the prescription that is needed for the patient. In order to connect the tubing, we have 2 female fittings, one on each side. This here is a 25-foot length. One side of your tubing will connect directly to your humidifier bottle spout at the cap. The other side of your oxygen tubing will connect to what we call an oxygen swivel connector. An oxygen swivel connector is a small white connector that will swivel and spin to prevent the oxygen tubing from kinking or binding under any circumstance of twisting. On the other side of your swivel connector is where you will connect your 7-foot supply tube or 4-foot supply tube going to your nasal cannula. This here is the nasal cannula, and that will connect to the opposite end of your swivel connector. Nasal cannulas will have a slip protector to help secure it to the actual patient once in place. And then if you look at the actual nasal cannulas, there is a curve in the cannula. You always want to make sure when placing this to the patient that the curve is going towards the patient's face, never away from the patient's face. So this would go over the ears and then into the nostrils. And then you can have this to slide it underneath. Whenever inspecting your nasal cannulas, you always want to inspect this on a daily basis. You want to check for hardening in the cannula itself, any type of discoloration and or cracking. If any signs of that are present, you want to discontinue use of the nasal cannula and change it out sooner than later. This can be cleaned on a daily basis with mild soap and water and allow it to hang dry and air dry until completely dry. You can place it in a Ziploc bag until the next time you'll be using the oxygen therapy. If you wanted to change this can be changed at least once every 2 weeks. So we clean it on a daily basis. You may change the actual cannula once every 2 weeks. The actual tubing itself has a different rate of change. When humidity is connected to the concentrator for the oxygen therapy, this oxygen tubing may be exchanged at least once a month. If no humidity is needed and you will be using just an oxygen Christmas tree adapter without humidity, this oxygen tubing may be changed once every 3 months. Okay. As you notice here, I do have a standard kit with standard flow And we do have two different color tubings, clear and green. There is no physical difference between the clear and green tubing besides the color. The green tubing is for those that have a higher TARB with visuals and or visual impairment, so it's less of a tripping hazard. When it comes to other types of oxygen therapy connections, the nasal cannula is usually the most common and the standard. However, they do have a standard oxygen mask that may also replace the oxygen nasal cannula. We would simply disconnect from your swivel connector and then connect the tubing that's connected to the oxygen mask in place of the nasal cannula. This will have some type of elastic strap and band that will help secure it over and around the patient's head, with a nasal clip to help secure it and pinch it around the nasal passage in the nostril area. This is suggested to begin using at 5 liters per minute and above. Anything below 5 liters, it will not adequately clear any carbon or CO2 that the patient has exhaled, and that may still be in the mask, allowing the patient to rebreathe that. So an oxygen standard mask is rated to be using at 5 liters and above. There are more specialized type of oxygen therapy systems. Say a patient has a bypass of their oxygen passages, of their alveolar and bronchial passage, and then now they are given a tracheostomy hole. If a patient has a tracheostomy hole, they may require the use of an actual tracheostomy mask, or also for short, a trach mask. A trach mask will have an elastic band. Sometimes they have their own adjustable collars that will slide around the patient's neck, secured, and cover over the patient's trach hole. And then you will have this port here that will connect to your oxygen tubing that will supply the humidity and oxygen therapy needed for the patient's trach. There are two different types of fittings to be concerned with when using a trach mask. Is your large 1-inch 50 psi corrugated tubing fitting, as well as your standard oxygen tubing adapter. Both of these may be used to be able to deliver high flow humidity and oxygen to the patient, depending on the type of equipment that will be used in the patient's home environment or medical environment to deliver the oxygen therapy. Besides your standard oxygen mask and trach mask, you have also a non-rebreather mask and a O2% lock mask, as well as a Venturi mask. A oxygen rebreather mask will have a bag on it, and the purpose of a non-rebreather is to prevent the patient from rebreathing any CO2 or carbon that they may have exhaled during the course of use of their oxygen therapy. A non-rebreather mask is recommended to begin using at patients rated at 10 liters per minute and above. When it comes to the specialized O2% lock mask or Venti lock mask, we have what they call a Venti system or Venturi system connected to the bottom of the oxygen mask that will allow you to dial in a specific FiO2 for the patient. FiO2 is fraction of inspired oxygen, and this will allow you to dial in a particular percentage of fraction of inspired oxygen to be delivered to the patient. Okay? This will be connected with a humidity cup adapter that will slide over, oxygen supply tube that will connect underneath, and then this here will connect directly going to the oxygen concentrator. One thing to be concerned with when using an O2% lock mask is it must be used with an 8-liter or 10-liter concentrator, as well as may only be able to be used with an oxygen Christmas tree adapter. The humidifier bottle itself has a pressure valve that is restricting the canister and cap to a certain amount of pressure for the oxygen therapy to be delivered to the patient. With a O2 Ventilock or Venturi mask, you have your FiO2 percentage. This is a restrictor within itself. So the combination of this device with this device will counteract each other and cause your concentrator to fail. So whenever this is in use, only a Christmas tree must be placed on the concentrator, and the tubing going from your mask will be placed directly to the Christmas tree. This cup here is a Humidity Cup Adapter that would allow you to lock it in place once you have your FiO2 selected and set, so that we may use a 50 psi compressor to be able to deliver high flow humidity while be able to deliver the oxygen therapy from the concentrator. Regardless of any type of accessory or oxygen mask that the patient may or may not be using or needed for the prescription setting, all safety rules and intervals of changing the mask and cleaning the mask should apply. All safety rules in regards to changing the water should also apply. Now, on the back side of your concentrator, there is a filter. This is a dust and dirt particle filter that is easily removable by pulling it out from the back side of the concentrator. This should be cleaned at least once a week, twice a week recommended, with simple mild warm water. Squeeze out any excess moisture in a lint-free dry cloth and place it back once it's dry. Stay away from using any type of scented soaps, as that may filter and stay stuck in the filter and then eventually filter into the oxygen therapy when placed back into the concentrator. So mild warm water is more than suffice. You always want to make sure there's at least 12 to 18 inches of space around any oxygen concentrator at all times on the sides, in the front and back, to make sure that it's well ventilated at all times. If there is any type of restriction of airflow movement around the concentrator, preventing it from being able to breathe, it may cause it to overheat and cause excess heat temperatures rising within the room environment. Whenever the concentrator may overheat, it may cause what they call water condensation traveling from your humidifier bottle through the tubing going to the patient. If this were to be consistent with that oxygen therapy in that environment, first recommendation would be to move the concentrator to an area that is better well ventilated, that has more fresh air passing through the room, and then as well as making sure we order an oxygen water trap. An oxygen water trap is a small cylinder trap with 2 caps that are removable, so that once water gets trapped in here before reaching the patient, you can empty it, place the cap back, and then reinsert this in the line. This should always be placed at the lowest hanging point of the line, because that's where most of the water would usually collect. So if my humidifier bottle was attached here, And I would have water condensation traveling from the humidity bottle through the tubing, eventually working its way to the nasal cannula. I would have my water trap, and I can either replace my swivel connector or add an additional tubing in between the water trap and the nasal cannula, so that this here can collect any water condensation before it actually reaches the patient and entering into their nostril area.